Good morning, people of God. It is good to be together today. I mentioned during the announcements that I have been participating with the Singing Resistance movement. And just as a little bit of background, so this is pretty fresh for me and for the country, frankly. But it's a movement that grew out of Minneapolis, and I'm sure many of you have seen videos from people singing in the streets of Minneapolis, outside of ICE buildings, lamenting people who've been taken and encouraging people who are trapped in their homes. It's been a beautiful movement, and I've been compelled by that because, one, I love singing, who doesn't? And two, the joy and hope that have emerged from that. So last week I went to a Singing Resistance gathering in Seattle. It was in West Seattle at the Heron's Nest, which is an outdoor education center near the Duwamish Longhouse and has been connected with the Longhouse. And it was like a rainy day, but there were even some cloud breaks during this time. So we were like sitting around this fire and singing songs together with Seattle neighbors. And there were even a few pastors there from some Lutheran colleagues that I ran into that I hadn't seen for a while. It was great. And at this gathering where there were several leaders, who, like, multiple people did the song leading and participated in the teaching. And in much the same way that when I've taught songs with you all, I'm not a professional musician, but we kind of lead with our hands and like call and response, and it's very participatory. And the first person to do this kind of song leading, they stood up and admitted that they were kind of nervous, and there were a lot of people, and so rightly so. And then they're getting ready to sing. And well, first we did a call, we learned the words together. And then they started a little bit too low and had to stop and start again. And someone from the crowd sort of shouted out, "It's okay, you're modeling good leadership," or something like that. And then the song leader sort of did a little model pose. She's like, "I'm always available for modeling." And everybody kind of laughed, and then we went on with it. But this idea of being available for modeling kind of stuck with me during this week, as both I was sort of figuring out what our movement here in Kirkland might look like and how to model that. And in reading this story of Jesus modeling something with his body for his disciples. And that little silly joke, which is funny because when you think of a model, you think of somebody who's poised and beautiful and has this certain standard of beauty that we think of, and is sometimes literally above the crowd on a catwalk or whatever. It was nothing like that. What we experienced together in learning, we were doing this together, and it was a bunch of pastors and hippies and resistance movement people and queer folks and all kinds of people all together in this crowd. It was nothing like a perfect, beautiful magazine shoot or catwalk, and that in itself was actually very, very beautiful. It was very beautiful. That story of care for community all together and singing songs about caring for community really resonated as I spent time with the story of Jesus with his disciples. This is a story, foot washing, that we don't usually encounter until Holy Week, until Maundy Thursday. A meal, oh, by the way, not the same thing as Passover or the meal where Jesus institutes communion. The story of John in the Gospel of John is much different than the other Gospels where Jesus, takes the bread and shares it with his disciples. They're each their own thing. But this story that we usually hear at the end of Holy Week, we get, or at the end of Lent, we now get sort of right at the beginning of Lent, the second Sunday of Lent. And we're going to get all through Lent all the stories we usually hear at that last part. We're really going to dwell with Jesus and his disciples as he's preparing for the cross in a very real way. And he's thinking about, as he knows that his death is coming, what does he most want to share with the people that he loves? He sees his death on the horizon, and he really wants to share with his friends and disciples the things that are most important to him. I've had several conversations in the last, I don't know, year, but even like recently with beloved elders, both here in this community and within my family and friends, who are thinking about as they age, what do they want to pass on to the ones that they love? What's the legacy that they want to share? Both like physical things, but also the beloved stories or teachings, things that are most important to them. They want to spend time with the people who are most beloved to them. And that's kind of what's happening here with Jesus. The story emphasizes with the use of the word teleos, which is translated different ways, but that's the part where the text says, and Jesus loved them fully, or Jesus loved them to the end. They're translated two different ways. Sometimes that can mean perfectly also. It's all of those things. Jesus is there and he'll be there to the end, to his death, and he will fully be present and love his beloved disciples and friends. And the other thing that maybe I knew, but I sort of realized anew or read somewhere this week is that we don't necessarily just need to picture this as his 12 disciples. When John talks about his disciples, he means sort of broadly Jesus' most beloved community and friends. And just last week, we heard the story of Lazarus and Mary and Martha, they're not part of the 12, but they were his like that inner circle, his close community and friends. So perhaps they were there too. And by the way, Jesus is still loving us this way, fully and to the end. And we think, again, when we think about modeling, if somebody says to you the word model, you get a picture in your head. It's often someone who's like putting on and showing off a set of clothes, modeling something. But even in that, I mean, obviously models didn't exist when Jesus was doing this for his disciples, but it's a script that Jesus flips, because not least of which he's not putting on clothes, he is literally taking off his clothes. And I was surprised when I was like looking up images of this story, how few of them picture Jesus unclothed. But it's explicit in this story. Jesus takes off his outer garment. He's stripping down so that he can be even more present in a very like almost uncomfortably intimate way when you actually like picture what's happening in this story. And it's why I know some people don't like foot washing, a little too intimate. And that's not the only way. Jesus is really disrupting the norm. One of the things that can happen sometimes when we read stories that we've heard over and over and over and over and over again is it's like, well, yeah, that's just the way it was. But there's all kinds of things that are just straight up weird that Jesus is doing in this story that are not just the way it was. Starting with taking his clothes off, it would have been absolutely ludicrous to think about a respected rabbi, even one who was sort of controversial like Jesus, taking his shirt off at the table. I mean, if you think about even now, sort of you're at a dinner party, someone takes their shirt off. I mean, no, just no. And he's a high status person who is washing the feet of the people who are with him. And it was normal practice. I think many of us know this, normal practice for people to wash their feet as they would come in to dinner. But usually it would be either they sort of do that themselves, or it would be a servant or a slave of the household who would do that menial task. And it's not at the beginning of the meal. Jesus is interrupting what is already happening. They're already gathered, they're eating, and Jesus interrupts whatever the conversation is that's happening to do this weird thing. Everybody's already reclined around the table, and he calls it, not only does he do it, he is calling attention to it and talking about it and using this as a moment for teaching and sharing and as an example for what they should also do. It is absolutely no wonder that Peter would say, no, thank you. No, never. Absolutely not. He is surprised and weirded out and doesn't understand what Jesus is doing. He doesn't understand that Jesus is trying to redefine what it means to be powerful, to be a leader, to be a teacher, of what it means to be Lord or Savior. It would have been incomprehensible to Peter. Nowadays, the idea of servant leadership is almost a buzzword. Like that's like, it's almost jargon for, like you can, I'm sure there are books about it. And Mennonites certainly have really embraced the idea of service and willingness to take on like yucky jobs. And any of you who have mucked out a muddy basement with Mennonite Disaster Service or have served in a hot camera kitchen in the summer and with joy and done so with joy and willingness. That is an understanding of how Jesus calls us into service, to serve our neighbors and do the gross jobs and do it willingly and joyfully. And that kind of service does take us, like it inverts the expectation of like not looking for power, not looking for status, and gladly offering the work of our hands. We're going to be doing that in just, 20 minutes from now. We'll all be sweeping and mopping and cleaning stuff out. And Kate especially is gonna love it. Like that is something we're used to and that we even enjoy. And many of us also take Jesus' words literally, and we have in this community washed each other's feet. And that too has been really beautiful and meaningful. In our best moments, we do this not just for our neighbors and our beloved friends, but also for our enemies. Jesus washed not only the friends, all of these were his beloved friends, but they were part of his community, but he knew that Peter was going to betray him. He knew, or to deny him, he knew that Judas was going to betray him and that act was going to be what would lead him to the cross. And Jesus washed their feet. When it comes down to it, I ask myself, can I serve or even sit beside the person who most annoys me? Can I serve or sit beside the one with whom I disagree? The person I think has it out with me? The person I don't feel safe with? Jesus did. He modeled that and he said, go and do likewise. But it's hard. And it's maybe even harder for us service-minded Mennonites to think about having enemies at all. It's also hard to let ourselves be served. I think sometimes we forget that that is part of the story. It's part of the story that Jesus told Peter, no, let me do this for you. It's, as I said, maybe too intimate, too much of an inversion to let someone who's more powerful than you take on that role with you, because there's also a power in being the one who is served. And yet, or like telling who should, like if I have a slave come and wash my feet, no problem. But if someone who I'm not used to doing that, letting them have that relationship with me, that's difficult. I was a volunteer coordinator for a few years, way back when I lived in Winnipeg. I don't think I was very good at it because I hate calling people and asking them to do things. I hate the idea that I'm inconveniencing someone, that they might need to clean up my mess. Kate, thank you. Very uncomfortable for me. I have a mother who taught us to clean up before the housekeeper came over. But let yourself be cared for. It's especially, this is I think especially important for women and other people who are usually assigned the caregiving duties, or whose identity means they have a lower social status. It's okay to release the expectation that you are the one who needs to step into that role. Jesus created a situation where the student, his disciple Peter, needed to model receiving care and attention. When our family lived in Korea 15 years ago or so, I would go. There's a really wonderful tradition in South Korea of going to the Chimchilbang or bathhouse, the spa. And I'd go at least once a week. And this is a place people would go with their families. Naomi, as a toddler, loved it. You're in your gender segregated areas where you just like you strip down and you soak and you get a scrub and maybe there's a like steeping herbs in one of those hot tubs and you get rid of all your gross dry skin and you just come out shiny and new, and it's especially wonderful when it's cold to go into that beautiful space. And now I pay someone once or twice a year to do that for me, and it's really wonderful and beautiful. But in Korea, it's much more common for a family to go together, or like two friends to go together, and you scrub each other's backs and you drink tea and you gossip or whatever. If you've seen K-pop Demon Hunters, you will have an idea, or like any K-drama. And I would try to, when I would go by myself, sometimes I would go with a friend, sometimes, but when I would go by myself, I try to sort of like stay out of the way because I'm this like very pink faced, curly haired foreigner. I just want to like blend in or at least not call attention to myself. And one day I was kind of like struggling to reach all the spots on my back. And someone else in the space just comes up for me. I don't speak very much Korean, but she's like gesturing, "Can I like help you?" And I was like, "No, no, 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 thank you. It's okay." Because weird. I don't know you. You don't know me. But like before I could kind of even refuse, she's just like, best scrub I had ever had to date. And I turned and I said, "Can I?" And like she kind of just disappeared. So she just gave me this beautiful act of service. Um, and I think about that every single time I read this story. Part of that like cleansing, washing experience, and also because while I have no problem paying someone to give me a pedicure or to give me a scrub, because like I can maintain power of this in that situation. To have this other woman, a neighbor, someone in my community do this for me and offer it completely like there was no reciprocity. I just had to receive it. Uh, I I had to receive it like Peter received the care of this person that he loved and trusted, and yet was his teacher, his his rabbi. What Jesus was doing for his friends and his disciples out of love, and he did that in a hope that they too would be available to model those things in the world. He was challenging the way leadership and love and power should be enacted. And he keeps inviting us to that, to wash the feet of your friend and your enemy. We are in this together. May we lead and be models to each other. Amen.